remember the exact moment when the question that had been lurking in the shadows of my mind finally surfaced. It was at my cousin Emma's wedding reception, amidst the clinking of champagne glasses and the ambient hum of congratulatory conversations. I was 34, single, and seated at the dreaded singles table, a collection of societal misfits in the eyes of the matrimonial world. "So, Olivia, when are you going to settle down?" "The clock is ticking, you know," asked my Aunt Margaret, her voice dripping with the special kind of concern reserved for unmarried women past 30. Her question wasn't new, but this time, something inside me cracked. "I'm actually quite happy on my own," I replied automatically, the words feeling hollow even to my own ears. Was I? The truth was, I didn't know anymore. I lived alone in my Boston apartment, had a successful career as an environmental lawyer, and maintained a small but meaningful circle of friends. By most measures, my life was full. Yet there was this persistent societal whisper that something was fundamentally wrong with me for not actively seeking a partner. That whisper had grown louder over the years, and on that wedding night, it became a scream I could no longer ignore. Later that evening, as I scrolled through the seemingly endless stream of coupled photos on social media, I felt a wave of something between confusion and despair wash over me. Not because I wanted what they had, but because I couldn't understand why I didn't want it more. Had I failed at something essential? Was there a fundamental flaw in my emotional makeup? Or was there something else happening, something I couldn't yet name? 3 weeks after the wedding, I found myself sitting in a sunlit office in Cambridge, facing Dr. Walker Teddy, a renowned psychiatrist whose book on modern relationships had caught my attention in an airport bookstore. I hadn't planned on actually scheduling a session, but after reading his chapter on societal expectations and personal authenticity, I felt compelled to seek his insights. "So, Olivia," Dr. Teddy began, his Texas drawl softening his academic tone, "tell me what brings you here today." I hesitated, suddenly feeling foolish. "I'm trying to understand why I'm okay being alone when everyone tells me I shouldn't be." He smiled, the kind of smile that suggested he'd heard this before. "That's a profound question. More profound than most people realize." He leaned back in his chair, hands folded over his substantial belly. "Have you ever heard of Carl Jung's concept of individuation?" I shook my head. Jung believed that the greatest achievement in life isn't finding another person to complete us, but becoming whole ourselves. It's a process he called individuation, the psychological evolution of becoming undivided, integrated. He paused, observing my reaction. "In my 30 years of practice, I've noticed something interesting. Women who choose to live alone aren't usually running from connection. They're often running toward a deeper kind of authenticity." Something in his words resonated with a quiet truth I had felt but never articulated. "But why does it make people so uncomfortable? You should see the looks I get at family gatherings." Dr. Teddy chuckled. "People fear what challenges their worldview. A woman who doesn't need external validation to feel complete? That's revolutionary in a society built on dependencies." Over the next hour, Dr. Teddy shared research and observations from his decades of practice. He spoke of a study conducted at the University of Michigan that found women living alone reported higher levels of personal growth and self-awareness than their counterparts in unfulfilling relationships. He referenced the work of British sociologist Anthony Giddens, who documented the emergence of what he called the pure relationship, connections based not on necessity or convention, but on mutual growth and genuine choice. As our session ended, Dr. Teddy gave me what he called homework, 3 steps to begin exploring my authentic relationship with solitude. 1. Document the whispers. Note every time I felt societal pressure about my relationship status and examine the beliefs behind that pressure. 2. Create intentional solitude. Spend time alone doing things that nourished my soul, distinguishing between loneliness, painful isolation, and solitude, nourishing aloneness. 3. Identify my personal truth. Write down what I truly wanted in life. Separate from what I had been told I should want. Come back in 2 weeks, he said as I stood to leave, and we'll see what you've discovered. I followed Dr. Teddy's instructions meticulously. The first step revealed patterns I hadn't recognized before. The pressure came most intensely from married relatives who themselves seemed unsatisfied, from advertising that equated coupledom with happiness, and from well-meaning friends who couldn't understand why I wasn't on dating apps. The second step was unexpectedly challenging. I realized how much of my alone time was actually filled with distractions. Netflix, social media, podcasts, anything to avoid genuine solitude. When I finally committed to true solitude, a weekend hiking trip in the White Mountains with no technology, I experienced both acute discomfort and surprising moments of clarity. But it was the third step that brought the most profound revelation. Sitting at my desk, attempting to articulate what I truly wanted, I realized I'd never really asked myself this question before. I'd been so busy responding to external expectations that I'd neglected to form my own. When I returned to Dr. Teddy's office, I felt simultaneously lighter and more grounded. Something shifted, he observed as I settled into the chair across from him. I realized I've been asking the wrong question, I said. I've been asking if there's something wrong with me for being comfortable alone, but now I'm wondering if there's something right with me instead. Dr. Teddy smiled. That's an excellent place to begin. Let's explore that. Over the next several months, my sessions with Dr. Teddy became a kind of excavation of myself. He introduced me to Jung's concept of the shadow, those parts of ourselves we deny or repress, and suggested that many women are taught to shadow their self-sufficiency, to dim their completeness in order to create space for someone else to fill. In Jung's framework, he explained during one particularly illuminating session, a woman who has embraced her wholeness isn't rejecting love. She's simply refusing to accept less than love in its truest form, a communion of two complete beings rather than the merging of two halves. He shared examples from his practice. A woman in Chicago who, after decades of emotional dependency, discovered at 58 that she could thrive on her own. A young woman from London who broke generational patterns by choosing solitude over a toxic relationship. A teacher in Toronto who found herself only after a divorce that everyone else considered tragic. These women aren't anomalies, he insisted. They're pioneers. They've done the inner work that many avoid. That phrase, inner work, became central to my journey. Dr. Teddy outlined what this work entailed. 1. Facing childhood wounds. Examining how my early experiences shaped my beliefs about relationships and self-worth. 2. Recognizing patterns. Identifying recurring themes in my relationships and emotional responses. 3. Integrating the shadow. Acknowledging and embracing the parts of myself I had been conditioned to hide or deny. 4. Establishing emotional sovereignty. Developing the capacity to regulate my emotions without external validation. 5. Creating authentic boundaries. Learning to say no to what diminished me and yes to what helped me grow. This work wasn't linear or easy. There were days when the weight of swimming against the societal current felt overwhelming. I remember calling Doctor Teddy in tears after a particularly difficult conversation with my mother, who insisted I would die alone if I didn't put myself out there more. What your mother fears, he told me gently, isn't your loneliness, but the possibility that you've found a kind of contentment that challenges her own choices. Sometimes our loved one's concern is really a projection of their own unaddressed doubts. 6 months into my work with Dr. Teddy, I experienced what he called a threshold moment, a breakthrough that fundamentally altered my perspective. It happened during a family dinner when my younger brother asked, with genuine curiosity rather than judgment, why I seemed happier living alone than many of our married friends seemed in their relationships. Instead of offering my usual deflection, I found myself speaking a truth I hadn't fully articulated even to myself. Because I've learned that being alone doesn't mean being incomplete. It means I've become a whole person who doesn't need someone else to fill my gaps. If I ever choose to be with someone, it will be to share my wholeness, not to find it. The table fell silent. Then my father, who had rarely commented on my relationship status, said quietly, I think that's very brave, Liv. That night, I wrote in my journal, today I stopped apologizing for my life. Today I began truly living it. Dr. Teddy was delighted when I shared this moment with him. That's the alchemy Jung spoke about, when what once caused shame becomes a source of strength. Now the real work begins. The real work, as it turned out, involved practical applications of my newfound clarity. Dr. Teddy guided me through what he called embodied sovereignty, the daily practice of living from wholeness rather than lack. This included 1. Creating rituals of self-connection, morning journaling, evening reflection, and mindful moments throughout the day to maintain awareness of my internal state. 2. Curating my environment, designing my living space to reflect and nurture my authentic self, rather than to impress others or fill emptiness. 3. Practicing conscious relationships, engaging with friends, family, and colleagues from a place of choice rather than need, expressing my truth without defensiveness. 4. Developing comfort with discomfort, learning to sit with the dissonance between my choices and societal expectations without feeling compelled to justify myself. 5. Finding community, connecting with others who understood and respected the path of conscious solitude. This last point led me to start a monthly discussion group called Sovereignty Circle, where women, and some men, gathered to explore themes of autonomy, authenticity, and intentional connection. What began as 6 people in my living room grew to over 30 within a few months, eventually requiring a move to a community center space. Sarah, one of the regular attendees, once remarked, I came here thinking I needed strategies for finding a partner. I'm leaving realizing I needed strategies for finding myself first. A year after that fateful wedding reception, I found myself at another family gathering, this time my niece's baptism. As I held baby Charlotte in my arms, my Aunt Margaret approached, predictably armed with her relationship interrogation. Still on your own, Olivia? She asked, though her tone carried less judgment than before. Yes, I replied, smiling at the sleeping baby. And I've never been less alone. Something in my voice must have intrigued her because instead of her usual platitudes about the one being out there somewhere, she asked, What do you mean by that? I considered how to explain my journey in terms she might understand. You know how people say you have to love yourself before someone else can love you? She nodded. I always thought that meant fixing yourself enough to become lovable. But I've learned it's about becoming so complete in yourself that you no longer need someone else's love to feel worthy. If I choose to share my life with someone, it won't be because I need them to make me whole. It will be because we choose to create something greater together than either of us could alone. To my surprise, her eyes welled with tears. I wonder if I ever felt that complete, she whispered, more to herself than to me. That evening, I called Dr. Teddy to share this unexpected moment of connection. "That's how change happens," he said. "Not through argument, but through authentic being. Your aunt glimpsed an alternative she perhaps never considered possible." I never thought my choice to be alone could actually help others, I reflected. Jung would say that's exactly how collective consciousness evolves, Dr. Teddy replied. Each person who does their inner work shifts the field for everyone else. In the months that followed, I noticed subtle shifts in how people responded to my solitary status. Some became genuinely curious. Others seemed slightly defensive, as if my contentment challenged their assumptions. A few even confided their own doubts about relationships they had entered primarily to avoid being alone. The most significant change, however, was in my relationship with myself. The question that had once tormented me, "What's wrong with me?" had transformed into an entirely different inquiry. What wisdom have I found by taking this less traveled path? My journal entries from this period reflect this evolution. Today I realized I no longer monitor my happiness against others' relationship statuses. My joy has become its own metric, uncalibrated to external standards. Had dinner alone at that new restaurant downtown. Noticed the waiter's initial pity when I said, "Just one." By dessert, he seemed to envy my peaceful enjoyment of my own company. Growth. Dream last night. I was in a house with many rooms I'd never explored. Each door I opened revealed another beautiful space I hadn't known was there. Woke feeling expansive. Is this what Jung meant by the unconscious revealing itself? 18 months after our first session, Dr. Teddy suggested we begin transitioning toward less frequent meetings. "You've developed your own inner guidance system now," he said with evident pride. "You don't need me as much anymore." At our final regular session, he asked me what I considered the most valuable insight from our work together. After careful consideration, I answered, "I've learned that my solitude isn't the absence of connection. It's the presence of connection with myself. And that connection isn't selfish or incomplete. It's the foundation of everything authentic in my life." Dr. Teddy nodded thoughtfully. Jung believed that only someone who has found themselves can truly find another. Most people try to do it backward. As I prepared to leave his office, he handed me a small carved wooden box. Inside was a compass with an inscription on the back. "The journey inward is the journey forward." "To remind you that you've always been heading in the right direction," he said. 2 years after that conversation with my aunt at the baptism, I received a call from her. She was visiting Boston and wanted to meet for coffee. Curious about this unprecedented outreach, I agreed. At the cafe, she seemed different, softer somehow, less certain in her pronouncements. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said that day," she admitted after we'd settled with our drinks. "About being complete in yourself. I've been married for 42 years, and I realized I've never really known who I am outside of being Richard's wife, the kid's mother, the grandmother." She twisted her wedding ring nervously. "Richard and I have started marriage counseling. Not because anything's wrong exactly, but because after all these years, we realized we don't really know each other. Or ourselves." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "That takes courage." "You inspired me," she said simply. "Watching you create a life on your terms made me wonder about my own choices." As we parted, She hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thank you for being brave enough to be different." It gave me permission to question. That night, I reflected on how far I'd come from the confused woman at the wedding reception. I thought about Dr. Teddy and how his guidance had helped me transform societal judgment into personal strength. I thought about the women in my sovereignty circle who were finding their own paths toward authenticity. Most of all, I thought about how the question that once haunted me, "Why am I okay being alone?" had evolved into a powerful affirmation, "I am complete as I am." My solitude was never a waiting room for partnership. It was a sacred space where I discovered myself, not in fragments seen through others' eyes, but in wholeness seen through my own. This doesn't mean I've closed myself off to love. Quite the opposite. By becoming whole, I've opened myself to the possibility of a love I wouldn't have recognized before, one built on shared growth rather than mutual dependency, on choice rather than need, on fullness rather than lack. As Jung wrote, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Now, if such a transformation occurs in my life, it will be an alchemical reaction between two whole beings, creating something greater than the sum of its parts. And if it doesn't, I remain complete, not half of an unfinished equation, but the full solution to my own unique life. The silence in my apartment as I write these words isn't emptiness, it's presence. My own presence, finally recognized, fully embraced. In that recognition, in that embrace, I have found not just myself, but a universal truth that extends far beyond my personal journey. We are each already whole. The world just teaches some of us to forget. Perhaps the greatest gift of my journey has been remembering, and in remembering, becoming a quiet reminder to others that there are many paths to fullness, many ways to live a meaningful life. Some of these paths wind through partnership, others through solitude, but all require the courage to listen to the wisdom of our own souls above the noise of external expectations. As Dr. Teddy once told me, the world fears a woman who has found herself because she becomes immune to its control. But the world also desperately needs such women, for they carry the map to a freedom many have forgotten is possible. I keep that map close now, consult it daily, and share it when I can. The coordinates are different for each of us, but the destination is the same. Home to ourselves, the most profound journey we will ever take, and the only one we must complete alone.